Erev Tov, good evening. We are beginning the next 2 weeks to study the laws of Pesach. The laws of Pesach are quite extensive. So, in order to study the laws of Pesach, we would need months. Now, our HaShamayim tell us that 30 days before a holiday, we're supposed to be able to learn all the halachot of a holiday. Our HaShamayim were better at learning halakha than I was. For me, it takes a long time to review the halachot of Pesach, especially to teach the halachot of Pesach. And so because of that, I just cannot. There's no way that I could possibly walk you through all of the halachot from the beginning of the month of Nisan till the end of the month of Nisan. If we're going to start with Birkat HaIlanot and all the other parashiot that we have to read in this time period, Chametz, Matzah, Se'or, all of the laws that have to do with searching for Chametz, all of the things that we have in Pesach, there's just too much. There's too much for me to be able to do in one shiur. So what we're going to do the next 2 weeks is as follows. We're going to take apart the halachot of the Seder. And I know that in the past we've learned the laws of the Seder in the writings of Harav Peretz, but this year I wanted to teach them from the writings of Rabbi Chaim Halevy, perhaps to zoom out a little bit and explain a little more about those halachot in this context. And really our focus for the next 2 weeks is going to be entirely the laws of the Seder Pesach. And this Sunday we have our Pesach seminar. So this coming Sunday, in order to join, you must RSVP. Whether you want to join in person or online, you need to register for that shiur. It doesn't cost anything. I just need to know how many people to expect. And that shiur will cover all of the halachot of making your home kasher for Pesach, kashering utensils in the kitchen, what you can buy, what you cannot buy, matzot, kitniot, all the wonderful things that we talk about every year. This series of shiurim, though, which is going to be tonight and tomorrow, and then next week, Monday, Tuesday, hopefully I will cover all of the laws of Pesach as it relates to the Pesach Seder in particular. So if you have this PDF file in front of you, it should say Mekor Chaim of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy. It's the 4th volume of the Mekor Chaim, so for those of you who might have your own set of Mekor Chaim at home, it's in the 4th volume. By the way, it's a very important set to own. If you can, those are sets you can easily order in New York, unlike some of the other ones that are more difficult to find. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy has a whole section on Pesach, but I only took apart from page 81, I believe. I started on page 81. Is that the number you have in your PDF? Chava, the second page of your PDF, did it say 81 at the top? There's got to be one of the 13 people in this call who can read numbers. Okay, page 81 is where the laws of the Seder begin. That's chapter 188, Kuf Pechet. I'm actually going to skip that entire chapter. We simply don't have the ability or even the need to really get into it. If we have time at the end of the series, I'll most likely do that. I want to begin with the laws of the Seder, and that's found on page 93. 93. Does anybody need help finding the PDF for tonight's shiur? If you go into the Google Classroom, you'll see a Zoom invitation. You just got in your inbox over there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, because before my mic wasn't working. I was trying to answer your question.
Oh, so someone can read numbers. We found the guy who can read numbers. Baruch Hashem. On page 93 of the PDF, so go to the Google Classroom. At the bottom of the Zoom invitation, there should be an attached PDF. It should be called Mekor Chaim. Mekor. And you want to scroll until you see the number 93 on the top left of the page.
Found it.
Perfect. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is going to walk us through the laws of the Seder Pesach. Leil HaSeder v'hilchotav. The laws of the Seder and the halachot of the Seder. Or the evening of the Seder and its halachot. Marlene, who said I was wide awake tonight? Halacha Aleph, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy. Mitzvat aseh shel Torah, it's a biblical Torah commandment, requirement. They normally translate mitzvat aseh as a positive mitzvah. In which case, then they translate mitzvot lo ta'aseh as negative mitzvot. I don't understand why you would call a mitzvah a negative mitzvah. So perhaps you could say it's an active mitzvah versus a passive mitzvah. I don't know the better word for that. Mitzvat aseh, there's an active biblical commandment. L'saper b'nisim u'v'niflaot shena'asu la'avotenu b'mitzrayim. To tell the stories of the miracles and the wonders that were done to our forefathers in Egypt. Belel chamisha asar b'nisan, on the evening of the 15th of Nisan. What is the 15th of Nisan? That's Pesach, very good. שנאמר להגיד זה, זכור את היום הזה, אשר יצאתם ממצרים. Remember this day that you left Egypt. Meaning, there's a mitzvah to recall, to remember this day that you left Egypt. ומניין שבליל 15, how do you know that it's on the 15th of the month that you're supposed to do that? תלמוד לומר, והגדת לבנך ביום ההוא לאמור בעבור זה. And you should tell your son on that day, telling him that because of this, בשעה שיש מצה ומרור מונחים לפניך. When the matzah and the maror are present in front of you, you have an obligation to tell over the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the miracles and the wonders that were done to our forefathers when they left Egypt. And even someone who does not have a son, by the way, this is all paraphrasing right now, almost word for word, if not word for word. The Rambam, in the 7th chapter of the laws of Chametz U'Matzah, in Halacha 1. So even if someone does not have a son, afilu chachamim gedolim, even big Talmidei Chachamim, chayavim lesaper b'Yetziat Mitzrayim. They must relate the stories of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Meaning, even if you don't have a child to tell it to, you still have an obligation for yourself to learn the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And even if you're such a big Talmid Chacham that you know the whole Torah, you know everything, it doesn't make a difference. Tonight there's still a special mitzvah to study the story of the Yetziat Mitzrayim. וכל המעריך בדברים שיראו ושהיו, הרי זה משובח. And anybody who spends a long time on this topic, who, not excessive is not the word, it can't be excessive. And here it's saying there's nothing excessive. The more that you speak about the story of the Jews leaving Egypt and the miracles that happened to Am Yisrael when we left Egypt, the better. So from this halakha we learned you have an obligation of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, retelling the story of the Jews leaving Egypt. The second halakha, also from the Rambam. Mitzvah lehodia labanim, it's a mitzvah to tell the children. V'afilu lo sha'alu, even if they don't ask. So even if your children don't ask you, what's tonight, what's happening tonight, it doesn't make a difference if they don't ask. Shneimar, like it says in the Torah, v'yigadata levincha, you must tell your child. Lefi da'ato shel ben aviv melamdo. And based on the intellectual capacity of a child, the father teaches the child. What does that mean? Ketzad, how so? Im haya katan. If he was a very small child, or tipesh, or a child that is lacking, listen, tipesh literally means stupid, but tipesh is a child who is not intellectually able to comprehend the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, maybe not because of their youth, but because of their maturity. Omer lo, he says to him, Bni, my son, Kulanu hayinu avadim, kemo shifcha zo, or kemo eved ze. We were all slaves, like who? Like this slave right here, that maidservant right there. You're living in a world where there are slaves, you're pointing. What does it mean, avadim? Where can you point to a slave today? In the US prison system, you have slaves. So you still have slaves. You could point there, that direction. Uvalayla hazeh, and in this night, Pada otanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yotzienu l'cherut. HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed us and made us free. So if you have a child, it doesn't have to be a long story. You say, hey, Elchanan, you see the slave over here? We used to be like him. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu freed us. We're not slaves anymore. That's the story of Pesach. Okay? Elchanan says, okay. Shalom Yisrael. We fulfill the mitzvah. Ve'im haya ben gadol v'chacham. And if the son was older, more mature, more wise, modi'o ma she'iranu b'Mitzrayim. He tells them everything that happens in Egypt. V'nisim she'nasu lanu al-yedei Moshe Rabbeinu. And all of the miracles that were done for us at the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hakol lefi da'ato shel ben. Everything in accordance with the intellectual abilities of the child. So Elchanan, can you tell me about the frogs in Egypt? What happened every time they hit a frog in Egypt? Another frog popped out. Tell me about what were the makot in Egypt? Okay, those are all the 10 plagues that were in Egypt. So now Elchanan is demonstrating how you're supposed to teach your child. Because I can't ask him to teach me, right? So he's the father teaching me how to... Now tell me something about makat dam that I didn't know. The water turns to blood. What about the water in people's water bottles in the house? So Elchanan is telling me, now he's already incorporating midrashim into the story. This is much more sophisticated of a story than the regular, the Jews got out of Egypt, we were slaves, now we're free, Shalom Yisrael. There's depth to the story. You could argue if midrashim are the right direction which to go down into the world of depth. But to be able to understand what's happening here in this story, to be able to explain things that are happening in the Haggadah. This is the mitzvah, v'akol lefi da'ato shel ben. Everything is in accordance with the intellectual capabilities of the child. Zev Erev Tov, you're the only one who showed up in person, so I made room on the side of the screen for you to see me. We're in your normal seat or in Yitzchak seat you want. I can see you straight. I made it. That's right. We're on page 93 of the PDF. This halakha is unique halakha, by the way. It's a halakha which says that the Pesach experience, the story of the telling of the story to the children of the Seder Pesach, is custom designed. It's meant to be made specifically for the children that are your table. There are very few halachot like this. Don't say, you keep Shabbat, however you can do it. The halakha doesn't work that way. There's another halakha I'm involved in right now, very deeply, that it's something very similar. In the laws of Giyur, tell me about the laws of Giyur. There's one rule. And after all the halachot of Giyur, Maran writes in Bet Yosef, Maran has a rule. What's the rule?
It's all according to the knowledge of the Beit Din.
Very good. Hakol lefi re'ot enei hadayan. The Dayan could decide this way, that way. At the end of the day, this is the final call, is in the hands of the Dayan. Which is exactly how you explain a story. If you remember, like Hillel and Shammai, there were the Gerim that came to convert by Shammai. He threw them away. He went to the Hillel. And they were asking them pretty ludicrous things. Teach me the whole Torah standing on one foot. Shammai throws them out. Is Shammai allowed to throw them out? Of course. At the end of the day, it's his call. Hakol lefirot enei dayan. So Hillel comes along. How do you convert somebody who says, teach me the whole Torah standing on one foot? How do you do it? The guy, is he serious? Is he not serious? Hillel says, fine, I'll tell you the whole Torah standing on one foot, tells him one sentence, and then converts him to Judaism. Who gave Hillel the right to do a giyur? It's a speedy giyur over here? It's the fast lane, easy pass? What kind of giyur is this? What gave Hillel the right to do a giyur like that? Hakol lefi re'ot enei hadayan. Hillel is saying, I know this person. I trust this. From what my few minutes of talking to this person, I feel that if they study Torah with me, that they'll become true tzaddikim afterwards. And so I'm willing to do a giyur now with my dad. I'm accepting responsibility on myself, but I know who this person is. This is the way very few halachot work. Very few halachot are this customizable. But this is one of them. In the third section, Gimel, וצריך לעשות שינוי בלילה הזה, and you must do some kind of different thing in this night. You do all kinds of unusual things. כדי שיראו הבנים, so the children can see, וישאלו ויאמרו, they should ask, מה נשתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות? Why is this night different from all of the nights? I mean, you're supposed to do unusual things at the Seder Pesach, so children ask questions. ויאמר להם, עד שישיב להם, until he answers them, ויאמר להם, should say, כך וכך, אירע, כך וכך היה. No, I'll tell you why we do this, because this happened to us, or because that happened to us, or because who did this for us, or Moshe Rabbeinu did that for us. You're supposed to inspire questions by the things that you do at the Seder Pesach. וכיצד משנה? How does he make a differentiation? And by the way, forgive me, there was one sentence in the Rambam that I wanted to consult with Rav Kapach about, but as I was running to the class, I didn't get a chance. Of course, it's the longest footnote that Rav Kapach could ever come up with. So let me read to you what the Rambam says. So what are the type of things we do to differentiate, to inspire questions to Seder? Mechalek lehem kelayot ve'egozim. The first thing we do for the kids is we hand out roasted grains, or dried grains more correctly, and nuts. Why? What's the point of dried grains and nuts?
Being busy.
So those are the candies of yesterday. I mean, the kids get special treats. It's a lot better than what we have going around now. That's right. These are, here, take a walnut. Today, you tell a kid, take a walnut. Baruch Hashem, my kids like macadamia nuts and all kinds of Brazil nuts, cashews. Baruch Hashem, that's also a thing. But I don't know that I could get them to stay awake the whole night if I offered them, peanuts, right? And just even think about it. In America, the expression peanuts is like a derogatory, almost like it's not worth anything.
Is popcorn considered a roasted grain? Actually, it's not even a grain.
It's not a grain, but it could count in this category. Really, some say to keep them awake. Some say there's a beautiful Rashbam here. Who's a Rashbam? Rashbam, who's the Rashbam?
Is he Rashi's son?
Rashi's grandson.
Grandson.
Rashi had I don't know what happened to Rashi, that he merited all these grandchildren who Tamdei Chamim, and everyone argued with him. Everyone in a different direction. I don't know how that how that relationship worked out that way. The Rashbam was a very dear commentary. Rashbam writes in Masechet Pesachim in Talmud Bavli, Daf Kuftet, Amud Aleph. Rashbam's commentary over there on this sugya says, why is the father giving out roasted, dried grains? Why not fresh grains? But you can eat fresh. You eat matzah on Pesach. You can have fresh grains on Pesach. These are roasted grains. You just make sure that no water comes in contact with them.
Oh, you're saying it's shura.
If it was bitter and dry.
Yeah. It was bitter, but what's easier to eat? Soft grains or crunchy, hard grains? Soft grains. Why not give them nice, soft grains?
Hard
Or
grain.
maybe it was Yashan.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Rabbanit. That's exactly what the Rashbam writes. The Rashbam says you can't give fresh grains because on the first night of Pesach, all of the grains are still chadash. They're still new produce. When do we start counting Sefirat HaOmer? On the second night. On the second night, that's when the Kohen begins to offer the Omer, and only after the second night in Eretz Yisrael, or the third night outside of Eretz Yisrael, we're able to eat new grains that are soft grains, fresh grains, because they're no longer chadash, and now they are yashan. And that's the reason why Chachamim instituted to give dried grains, or the roasted grains, because those are the only ones you can keep fresh until Pesach.
It says in the Torah that they ate parched grains.
Right, we're talking here about the Gemara here. And the Gemara here, we're talking about why are we giving the children these grains? And the answer is because we can't give them anything else. Because once upon a time, Jews kept Yashar. There was a world. I just thought it was interesting that if you read the Talmud and the parameters, the frame of reference of our HaShamayim, then you'll understand things there differently. No, it's a way of preserving the grains. You either dry them or roast them from last year. That's how you hold on to them. If you leave fresh grain lying out, presumably they'll dry up, which then puts them in the category of klayot. But the fresh grains that you harvested recently, you're not able to eat them yet, not until the second night of Pesach. So we should also take it out of our heads that grains are not chametz. Grains are permitted to be eaten on Pesach. Flour, you're allowed to use on Pesach. You can have cakes and cookies on Pesach made out of flour. They're just rules. That's how you make them.
What about the whole status of the Shura grain?
Right, so...
Fields here in Arizona where people come in and watch it all year. Is that just a neck?
Binyamin Simcha, the status of Shmura grains. You want to give us a little 30-second insight?
I never heard back from you regarding my question regarding this Shmura.
I didn't answer you on purpose. I don't answer every question in public.
Oh, I sent you privately too, I think.
I ignored you there also. I don't know. I wasn't ignoring you. I shouldn't have time to answer you yet. So there's really, there's a Rashi. By the way, it's here. If you want to look it up in the book itself later, if you look on the page 82, you'll see the bottom of 81, the top of 82, there's really a machloket between the Rashi and the Rif and the Rambam as to why we need Shemura grains. The Rashi mentions that the harvesting itself has to be done for the sake of matzot. And so there needs to be Jewish people that are harvesting this properly. According to the Rif and the Rambam, the only reason that we're guarding these grains is to protect them from getting wet. And so practically there would be a difference. Benjamin Simcha, I think that your answer to the question would really depend on Rashi versus the Rif and the Rambam.
That's what the article you sent me.
Exactly. Maran seems to, from my understanding of Maran only requires that we just know that they're not wet. I mean, they didn't get. By the way, technically, even if grains get wet and get dried right away, do they become chametz? No. Only if they get soaked in water do they then become chametz. So the whole thing of making sure that the grains are not processed with water and all that, really, this is already technically it could be chumrot.
Then you have a sprouted grain is no longer zolot, it's a damal or
A sprouted grain, though, I'm not talking about the sprout. I can't answer the sprout. Someone asked you the sprout today. But the grain itself that's left in the bottom, that grain is the definition of chametz. How do you know? Maran writes, they have grains. You don't really know if they were soaked or not. You don't know if they became, by accident, a grain fell into your soup. How do you know if it became chametz or not? Maran has conversations. How split is the actual grain itself? Is it very split? Is it not? These things are what determine something's chametz status. We've put the fence, and it's good. Chametz on Pesach is a severe prohibition. But we put the fence so far away from what the actual halakha is that I'm not even sure that anybody ever eats anything with chametz inside of it. On Pesach, for sure not. Someone asked me today about all kinds of different products. I really don't want to go to kashrut right now, but they ask about natural flavors. Do you know how natural flavors work? I mean, I don't know that you want to know how they work. No, they work. Nobody's actually taking natural flavors are breaking down of I have Talmidim that are actually experts in this, but it's gone through. They extract a flavor. It's called an ester. They extract these esters. They single them out. Then they mix them in with other stuff. And you're talking about something that most likely went through a process that's not even. It's not even a issue of chametz at all in the first place. There are a lot of things like that, and I'm not telling you it's good that the world produces food like that. I'm just telling you that's really, it's very hard to find unless there's overt chametz in something. A lot of the things you hear people tell you should be worried about. By the way, even if you don't agree, yeah, Benjamin, I saw the olive oil. What could it be? This olive oil is approved for Pesach, this olive oil is not approved for Pesach. They're both olive oil, so what's the difference between the olive oils? What could be in the olive oil that's chametz?
It might have canola oil mixed in it, don't you know?
So let's pretend, okay, canola, let's pretend canola is not kidneyot. Okay? They didn't know what canola was then. But let's say you had another oil, corn oil. I don't know, you can make oil from corn. People use corn oil. Let's say they have corn oil mixed with olive oil. Even for Ashkenazim, is that prohibited? Oil from a corn? You're pretending that corn is kidneyot. Okay, let's pretend. Let's pretend that the derivatives of kidneyot are kidneyot. Okay, let's pretend. We keep pretending. Now it's mixed in with something else. We're pretending. Now you can't even take... The whole thing with them putting inferior oils with superior oils is that they put just enough olive oil so you only taste the olive oil. But the feeling... I saw this once. I went to a restaurant depot. And I went to go buy sesame oil. I use it sometimes to flavor foods. The sesame oil is this expensive. There's a very cheap sesame oil right next to it. And that one was like 97% canola oil with 3% sesame oil. I mean, they've done the math that much sesame is all that's required to actually taste the sesame, and everything else could be, cheap oil. But these things also, all of those are factors, and so it's not even, meaning if it was chametz, it would be okay, but here it's not even chametz, it's kidneyot. It's not even kidneyot, derivative kidneyot. Not a derivative kidneyot, it's a derivative kidneyot mixed into something else. How far can you take the chumrah of kidneyot? To which extreme? And then to make lists of, someone put out a kosher agency, put out a list, 8 foods that they approve so generously as kasher for Pesach without any hechsher. I think it was like walnuts and almonds and cashews and something else, some other, a fish. Fish was kasher to Pesach, but only this one in this package from this company. Someone needed you to put out a list telling me that walnuts are kosher for Pesach? Only the Shaar. Okay, I didn't want to go to kashrut. Shell on your own, right? Because what might happen? Might be chametz. Right? When? But in a world today where people are taking gluten allergies very seriously, companies that, there's some packages they write. If you go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, I've seen in the back of packages, it says we take deep pride in our commitment to avoid cross-contamination of our food products. And that's something they take very seriously. It's not even the lawyers coming after them anymore. Now it's something that companies are going out of their way to make sure that things don't get... I once went to buy a fish in Whole Foods. Why? Long story. I was there buying fish in Whole Foods, the only time in my life. I think I'm still paying the bill for that fish I bought at Whole Foods. But over there, between every type of fish you order, they change their gloves. Between every fish they order, they change their gloves. And I mean, this is which cross-contamination in the first place? As if the fish doesn't swim in an ocean with octopus and crabs and whatever else swimming around with him in the ocean. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writes in the Masechet Shabbat that the Torah will be forgotten from the Jewish people. And when he was asked to explain, what do you mean the Torah will be forgotten from the Jewish people? He said that clear Torah study and clear halakha will no longer be found in any one place. That people will forget how to learn halakha properly, and the world will become chaos. I think we're in that generation of Atidat Torah shetishtachach misarach malaitza. V'okrim hashulchan lifnehem kodem sheyochlu. And right before the children are about to eat, we take away the table from them. What do you mean you take away the table? How do you take away a table?
Change the tablecloth, maybe?
You cover the matzah.
Okay, so you're changing cloths, covering matzot. You're talking about later. Talk to me how people used to eat.
The shared plate tables, sort of, like they would be in front of us. Like you still see this, like in some Arab countries they eat this way still.
Have you ever seen a beautiful Arab home in the Middle East? And you come into a beautiful room with carpets and walls and marble, but no furniture in the room. It's like a huge room with no furniture. Because you sit on the floor, on couches, on pillows, and the table is something they bring to the middle, and it's something they take away. So you bring, kind of imagine like a tray that you would serve on today, that maybe it even has a stand to put on. So you take it away and you bring it back, and all of this is intended to ask questions. So nowadays we don't have that, so there are all kinds of minhagim of covering the table, uncovering the table. You should know by the Tamanim, for example, the original Seder plate is not a plate. The original setup for the Seder plate, the whole table is a Seder plate. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. The whole meal revolves around this setting of the table. So why is it on a little dinky plate in the corner? This is the whole table. And so they would take away, that's why remove the Seder plate, cover the Seder plate. All of these minhagim stem from an original Jewish custom of removing the entire table, which was the Seder plate. V'chotfim matzah ze miyad ze, and they grab matzah. Listen, there's many ways to understand. In the Gemara, it's already, you have commentaries discussing whether this means that we take the matzah off the table perhaps, or we pass it from hand to hand. There are all kinds of different commentaries. I don't want to get into that right now. V'chayotze b'dvarim helu, and all kinds of things like that. En lo ben, what if you don't have a child? Ishto shalto. So your wife asks you the questions and you answer. Why your wife asks you the questions? The whole purpose is just to promote conversation. You're supposed to have conversation surrounding the story of leaving Egypt. En lo isha, but if he doesn't have a wife, shalin zeh zeh. So him and his friends, or whoever he's with, ask each other, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Ve'afilu hayu kulam chachamim, even if they were all chachamim. Haya levado, shoel atzmo, ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Then if he's sitting alone, then he says ma nishtana to himself. Because the whole purpose is to have a conversation about Yetziat Mitzrayim. But it's a fascinating conversation about whether or not you can fulfill this mitzvah just in your mind. You might actually have to say things, say them. There's a mitzvah speech, possibly. Look on page 94 at the top of the page. Halachot ele. Now Rabbi Chaim David Halevy jumps out of the big letters into the smaller letters. So this is Agadah, or an idea. These halachot, shem koram b'divrei rabotenu b'Mechilta v'Talmud, whose origins are in the Mechilta and the Talmud, melamdot ikaron gadol v'chashuv b'mahut laila kadosh zeh. They teach us a profound insight into the essence of this holy night. Shekol ikaro hu sipur hanisim v'niflaot shenasu l'avotenu b'Mitzrayim. The whole purpose of this night, of the night of the Seder, is to spend time discussing, telling the story of the miracles that happened to us in Egypt. La'atzmo, to himself, livneveto, to one's household members. Uvikar lebanim, and especially to the children. Keneged arba'a banim dibra Torah. The Torah speaks to 4 children. Remember, that's what we say in the Haggadah. Who are the 4 sons?
4 sons of who?
In the Haggadah. You remember them? There's a Chacham. There's a Rasha. Right, he's the Cham, the Tam, and the one who Sheno Yodea Lishon. These are the 4 sons. And how many of the halachot and the minhagim surrounding the eve of the Seder Pesach, how many of them exist only to promote conversation with one's children at the Seder table? When the sanctity of the holy night begins. And every home in the Jewish people is full of light and the blessing of Hashem. Orot zoharim shelo min ha'olam hazeh mitzifim or v'chom b'chol bet Israel. Glowing light which do not emanate from this world. They overflow the home of every Jewish person with light and warmth. I think for some people the only thing overflowing their house on Seder Pesach is the smell of Clorox and potatoes. Here Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is illustrating for you what Pesach is supposed to be. You come home, it's the holiest night of the year, mamash that. You feel light, you feel joy, you feel warmth. That's the feeling of Pesach. Not people are falling off their face, or people's fingers are burning from all the chemicals they use to clean their house, but I'm telling you now, there's a chemical they use on the East Coast. They call it, Rabbanit, you tell me what it's called. Saint Moritz? Morin?
Saint Moritz.
Say it again?
Saint Moritz, M-O-R-I-T-Z.
That one. This is really, it burns off people's skin. There are people every year, children in the emergency room because someone left a bottle lying around, it burns somebody's face. For which purpose? What happened to the holy light that fills your home with warmth, with holiness? V'simchat chag, and the joy of this holiday, mimalat chedrei halev, fills up all of the compartments of one's heart. Every post I've seen in Pesach in the last 2 weeks, from the Haggadah that is advertised, we're not trying to stress you out, but we've released a new Haggadah for Pesach. Why are you stressing me out? What's happening? Today I saw a cookbook. This cookbook will make your Pesach stress-free. Why is the assumption that Pesach is stress-free? Is stressful? Why is Pesach stressful? Only 8 foods. Okay. Yeah, how many meals can you make from the 8 foods? If you have a large diet, if there's 8 foods you can eat. You're from the list. From all of this, a person might forget the real purpose of this night. Especially when non-COVID years, or I guess in some places in the world where COVID doesn't exist anymore, in those places where family members get together, and they're the family members you don't see every day. They're not the people you see all the time. The distractions, you're happy, you're seeing people, there's the desire to talk about things. You forget the main part of the Seder. What's the main part of the Seder? Et habanim, the children. Hagdolim, v'aktanim, the older ones and the younger ones. She'erev zeh noad lahem. This night was made for them. Ki hem merkaz ha-seder. They are the center of the Seder. Golat ha-koteret shel kol chag ha-matzot. They're the highlight of the holiday of Matzot. Et yiladav, your children, tzon kedoshim, the holy flock of Israel. Yoshiv adam svivo mamash be'erev zeh. They should sit literally next to the parents in this Seder. And he writes in parentheses, v'lo b'ktzot ha-shulchan, not at the far corners of the table. People have this desire when they set the table, they put all the children all the way far away from them. There's the grown-up table and the children's table. But there's a special place in Gehenom for people who have those kind of tables. In my home, we only make kids' tables when there's so many kids, they want to sit together because they don't want to sit with us anymore, so then there's a kids' table. But this feeling of like banishing children to exile to this table where the 12-year-old is now sitting with the 2-year-old and they're pouring soup on it. There are kids that are old enough. They're old enough to really sit at a table and have conversations. My parents have a good solution. They have a special kids table, but it's attached to our table. So it can get dirty and all kinds of things happen, but Baruch Hashem, they're all at our table. But the mitzvah is this time, all of your guests, they can sit on the end of the table. Your kids, they sit right next to you. Last year was my best Seder in the world, aside from that I didn't have my parents with me in my Seder. Last year we didn't have a Seder together. So it was just my wife and I and my children. Where do we sit? Do you remember where we sat?
Sat on the couch, everybody next to each other. I remember we put the table near the couch, and then we ate all on the same couch.
That's right. We got our couches together. We all sat on the couch together. We put a table in front of us together. By the way, it's the only time you could really fulfill the mitzvah of leaning. To lean properly, you can't lean on a chair. Normally, the real way to lean, you need a couch. You somewhere for your head. You need to be able to lean backwards. To sit with my children, just them. There's no guests. There's no. Who cares if the food never comes out of the kitchen? There's nobody who's hungry. I'm not waiting for it. I'm not waiting on anybody, and I'm not serving anybody. And it was one of the most unique Pesach experiences I had in my life. That's the way it's supposed to be. People forget. Everything that you say, the Seder should be directed to your children. יתאמץ וישתדל במיטב יכולתו להחדיר בהם את גדולת המאורע ההיסטורי הגדול של יציאת מצרים וכל המשתמע ממנו כפי שדיבר להלן. And it's your job to do the best job you possibly can to tell your children, to try to pass off, to impress upon them the greatness, the historical significance, the holiness of the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt. אמרו עליו על רבי עקיבא. They say about Rabbi Akiva. This is from that page in Seder Pesachim, page 109 that I told you about. שהיה מחלק כליות ואגוזים לתינוקות בערב פסח. He handed out nuts and grains to children on the eve of Pesach כדי שלא ישנו וישאלו. So they wouldn't fall asleep and they would ask questions. תניא רבי אליעזר אומר, רבי אליעזר taught us, חוטפים מצה בליל פסחים. They grab the matzot on the eve of Pesach בשביל תינוקות שלא ישנו, so the children don't sleep. תניא אמרו עליו על רבי עקיבא. They told רבי עקיבא, they say about him, מימיו לא אמר, הגיע עת לעמוד בית המדרש, חוץ מהרבה פסחים. He never, רבי עקיבא never said, okay, it's time to leave the בית המדרש. Except for on the eve of Pesach. בשביל התינוקות, because of the children, כדי שלא ישנו. So they wouldn't sleep. וערב יום הכיפורים כדי שיאכילו את בניהם. And on the eve of Yom Kippur, why? so that people could go feed their children. We'll talk about the significance of leaving the Beit HaMikdash early on Erev Pesach in a moment. Now let's do some halachot. I think we can at least finish these halachot today. Halakha Dalet, so it's in the bottom, page 94. Yesh shulchano aruch mi ba'od yom. You should already set your table for Pesach during the day. K'dei lechol miyad k'shetechshach, so that you can begin eating immediately when it gets dark. Okay, this year it's a whole. By the way, everything this year is a different year. So I will, B'ezrat Hashem, on Sunday, touch on this whole Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbat. Yeah? Okay, but still, so let's say, your table is set so that you can eat immediately. Okay, I don't know if you should be setting Shabbat. Okay, let's leave it. That's a good point. הכוונה לעריכת הסדר שהארוחה היא חלק ממנו. So you don't immediately eat right when it gets dark, but you begin your seder when it gets dark. ואף אם הוא בבית המדרש, and even if you're in the בית המדרש, יקום, you should get up, מפני שמצווה למהר לאכול בשביל התינוקות שלא ישנו. There's a mitzvah to go home and eat so before the children will fall asleep. So your priority now is not learning Torah. Your priority now is to teach your children. What good is it going to do if you sit around the Beit HaMikdash praying, talking, learning, whatever you do, and your children fall asleep at home waiting for you? Your whole job tonight is them. Mitzvah lechalek chayot ve'egozim k'dei shiru shinui v'yishanu. Maran writes that it's a mitzvah to give out nuts and grains, whatever you want to give to the kids. Shlisha, what's tonight? What's happening tonight? What's so special tonight? Tonight is Pesach. Right, I give it all the time. Why did I get this treat? Today is Rosh Chodesh. Today is to tell them why things are happening. ופשוט שכל זה לפני עריכת הסדר כדי לעורר תשומת לב. And all this is before the seder to awaken their attention. וכן ראוי ליישן את התינוקות. My mother is going to love this word. There's a mitzvah ליישן את התינוקות. Someone translate this for me.
Put the children to sleep.
Yeah, put the children to sleep. In Hebrew today you would say lahashkiv, like to lay down the children. But here it's the verb of to sleep. I mean to put the children to sleep. When? B'yom erev Pesach, on the eve of Pesach. Why? K'dei sheyuchlu liyot erim balayla, so they can be awake at night. In my house, I remember my parents putting me to sleep on the eve of Pesach so we could stay up by the Seder. My wife always remembers going to sleep, and she never went to sleep. Why didn't she go to sleep? Anybody know why? You know why Ima didn't ever go to sleep on erev Pesach? Because Ima always wanted the new clothes that Babi and Zaidi bought for her. And she knew that when she would wake up, she would get those new clothes. So she already wanted to wake up so she could get her new dress or whatever, her new shoes, whatever. Rabbanita, I'm telling the story right?
Absolutely.
And since then, she has inspired generations of toasters. My children, you put them in bed, they pop out. You put them in bed, they pop out. You put them in bed, they pop out. So ever since then, my wife, it's her, Maaseh Avot Siman Banim. It's all her fault, right?
Okay, I like that toaster.
It's better than Pop-Tarts, I want to respect the Kedusha of the place. ומצווה על האב שהוא החייב בחינוך בניו וקיום מצווה ויראת המנחה, שידאג לכך ליישן את התינוקות כדי שיהיו ערים בלילה. It's the mitzvah on the father, it's also the parents, but the mitzvah on the father to put the children to sleep because it's his job to do the mitzvah later. עיקר עריכת השולחן הוא קערת הסדר. The main setting of the table is the seder plate. ועריכתה מבוארת ומצוירת במחזורים, and you could find it illustrated in every מחזור. There are all kinds of ways to set the seder plate. It seems to me that the most prevalent among the people that I've seen, even Ashkenazim and Sephardim, is the way of the Arizal. I'm not getting involved, I'm just sharing that's most likely what I've seen at the beginning of the Haggadot. And as I told you that in the Yemenite seder plate, there is no seder plate, it's a seder table, as was the way of the original Am Yisrael. Lettuce. Yes. I think on my website we have a picture of that. The image of what does a set-up plate look like? There's certain images that we broadcast to children, and they grow up and they don't realize that things are different, that there are different flavors of Judaism than the ones they were told about in school. When I was in Baltimore, one of my rabbis, a Sephardic rabbi, pushed very hard that in every one of these Jewish day schools where they have pictures of these big rabbis, they should put pictures of Sephardic Chachamim. Even if they wouldn't tell them who they were, meaning you can't expect that much from them, right? Because once someone came to his house, a day school child, and saw a picture of the Ben Ish Chai on the cover of one of the books. And he was horrified because, why do you have a picture of Osama bin Laden on your books? It's like a 6th grader, 7th grader, someone old enough, you could tell him, Chachamim, look, this is what Chachamim look like. Not like Chazron like Osama bin Laden, but this is the Ben Ish Chai. This is what the Kehillat. I don't even know what the Rambam looks like, but the picture that they claim to be the Rambam's picture. There are things to put in our children's mind. Like Rav Uziel, what did he look like? Chachamim, what do they look like? On page 95, Dineh Heseba. Now last year, you might recall that I told you that this word is problematic for me because it's spelled in so many different ways. Hasiba, Hasaba. The way I heard it from Haraper, it's always as Heseba, Heseva. And that's the way that I'll pronounce it. You'll notice that in some books they even spell it differently based on how they pronounce it. I'm not here. If you have a tradition on how to pronounce this word, you pronounce it however you want. The laws of leaning. Is that the right way to... Reclining, that's a good word. The laws of reclining on Pesach. B'chol dor v'dor, on every generation, page 95, chayav adam le'arot et atzmo. A person must show himself, must feel. Kilu hu b'atzmo yatsa atam mishibud Mitzrayim, that if he himself left Egypt, shene'emar, like it says, v'otanu otzim misham, that it's us that he took out of there. V'al zeh, and about this, tziva HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Torah, HaKadosh commanded us in the Torah, v'zacharta, and you must remember ki eved hayita, that you were a slave. Klomar, not that my forefathers were slaves, that I was a slave. Ki'ilu ata be'atzmecha hayita eved, that you yourself was a slave. V'yatzata nechirut v'nifdeta, you were set free and redeemed. Lefichach, and therefore, keshe soed adam belayla zeh, when a person eats in this meal, on this night, tzarich le'echol v'lishtot, a person must eat and drink. V'hu mesev derech chirut, and he leans the way that a free person would lean. Now, we're not used to this at all in our world, in any which way. I don't know that anybody eats leaning. Aside from the Arabs, which we mentioned earlier, the Arabs preserve many of these ways to eat, to sit. So over there, it could be that it's a status to be able to lean back on an ottoman and eat grapes. I don't know, on a vine. Who knows what people do that way? I mean, that would be considered but for us, I don't know, if you would go to a restaurant here, a very expensive restaurant, nobody's leaning in their chair because they're wealthy people. It's not a thing that happens in the West. It's for this reason, I believe the Tur brings the name of the Avi Ezri. I think that's the book that he quotes there, one of the Ashkenazi Chachamim, that nowadays there's no need to lean at all because nobody leans. And even though I'm not telling you that's the halakha, right, what I am going to tell you is that understanding does coat the way we look at this halakha in general in the Bet Midrash V'Raperet, which is, let's say a person didn't lean properly. I can't say halachot against Shulchan Aruch. What I can say though is it's possible that our way of showing freedom is different than the way our chachamim saw. I'm not telling you it's right. I'm just telling you that it is. Yes? And then we start to have conversations about whether or not women should lean or they shouldn't, and the questions that go around there. In general, the attitude of Mori Rav Peretz is to be lenient, all about leaning, just because if you can recline properly, then fine. Most people though don't recline properly. It's like the way people do tachanun. You ever gone to Sefaradim? They don't do nifilat apayim anymore. You ever seen how Ashkenazim do nifilat apayim? When they do tachanun, what do? You ever seen this? You know what I'm talking about? Now some are very careful because they know that you can't have, you shouldn't have your face touching your hands. So what do? They put a tissue like this. I've seen this in my life. What is this hand motion that's happening here? What are you doing?
Sad.
What is nifilat apayim? What does it look like, nifilat apayim? To fall on your face. Mamash, to fall on your face. If you wanted to do it in a chair, so let's say you weren't doing it on a floor, you're doing it in a chair, the way that a person would be totally crumpled on a table, that's a nifilat apayim. This is, I don't know, it's zecher nifilat apayim. Yeah, it's in memory of. It's like mayim acharonim. How do you do mayim acharonim? You wash your whole hand, then you wash your whole hand. What do people do today? They bring this much water for 30 people on the table, and then everybody does this thing, and then I don't know what they do. There are all kinds of things they do with their mayim acharonim afterwards, and then they say, oh, mayim acharonim. But this water, that's not water. It's a zecher l'mayim acharonim. Also, this thing with heseba. People lean. So how do they lean? They go like this. They drink like this. It hurts. Maybe the chiropractors like this type of hesed, but that's not leaning. I mean, you don't actually fulfill any halakha by leaning that way when you drink your wine. You're not doing hesed at all. Harapel's always told me 95% of the people who lean by the Pesach Seder are not fulfilling the mitzvah of leaning. So it would be better for them just to rely on the opinions that say you don't have to lean at all, instead of fooling yourself that you are leaning. I can't do it here in the setup we have now, but those who want to see on a couch or on a chair, a more comfortable chair on Shabbat, I'll show you how you actually lean. And halakha zayin. Yisader shulchano yafeh bekelim na'im kefi kocho. A person should set their table very nice. As much, every person has their own financial abilities, how to set their table. It's important to make sure, in Arapel, it's a particular, his whole life, not to use plastic or paper plates. Never, ever. I don't know. Even, I remember once we brought him tea in a paper cup and he sent it back. He said that people who have any kind of integrity in the world drink only out of real utensils. It was his teaching us, not in order to be arrogant, to teach us, bring it back in a glass cup and something. Like you would never do kiddush in a styrofoam cup. So why are you drinking your Shabbat meal in a styrofoam cup? I mean, by the way, last time I said that, someone told me, we do kiddush in a styrofoam cup. So I don't mean to make anyone upset. But when you eat or drink at the Seder table, it should be nice. So in the Beit HaKnesset, when we used to do Pesach Seder, pre-COVID, we made sure to always go and buy at least expensive, like plasticware. It was disposable, but it should be nice. But even then, my wife always packed for me a ceramic plate and a glass bowl and a glass cup just for myself for Seder Pesach. We left with all the riches and the spoils. There's also minhag to leave like that. And I'm just going to add in there a caveat, which is you can't now go to your spouse and say, oh, I heard the rabbi shiur says you have to use china and da-da-da, and then, okay, so you now have a seder for 20 people, and now your wife stays up all night washing dishes because of my shiur. I don't condone that kind of behavior at all. If you do that, you should eat in your hands and wash your own hands afterwards, but nobody else should have to work hard because of what I just said. That's not the point. And you should be able to arrange your seat that you should have the ability to lean properly. I'm going to tell you at the very least, if you want to listen to me, and I'm not sharing anything more than this, if you want to make sure that you who are leading the Seder, when you lean, you at least are up against the wall so that you can lean your head properly. I mean, that's the account here of leaning is going to be that your head can lean against something. Our rabbis attached this mitzvah of leaning to an actual biblical verse that says in the Torah, "Vayasev Elohim et ha'am," that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He took us out of Egypt, He made us go around in circles. Vayasev, like sivuv, a dreidel, sevivon, spins. Hashem took us around the desert. Mikan amru, from here our rabbi said, Raboteinu, afilu anishi b'Yisrael, even a poor person in the Jewish people, lo yochal ad sheyasev, he cannot eat until he leans. Ad shekach asa lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us, Shneimar, vayasev Elohim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us in a roundabout journey. Vayen biro behara, and look in my note, ucheshehu mesev lo yate al gabo, v'lo al panav, v'lo al yimino, el al semono. And you shouldn't lean forward or backwards, rather, or to your right, only to your left. I don't want to do the footnote. I don't want to distract. Halakha chet. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy writes, Isha tzricha heseba. A woman must lean at the Seder table. Look at footnote 14. Kidivrei Maran sham. That's the words of Maran. Right? Does anybody have a Shulchan Aruch in front of you? Anyone have a Shulchan Aruch? Rabbi Yosef, you have a Shulchan Aruch somewhere? Or,
Yeah?
Yeah, I have. I think. Yeah, I have one available.
Look up for me Siman Taf Ayin Bet. And just tell me what Maran actually writes and see if down it over there. And he says here, like Maran writes, that an important woman needs leaning, needs reclining. The Rama says that all of our wives, all of our women are important women, and therefore they need to do hesibah. So he writes that women do hesibah. Let me know when you found it, Yosef. V'chen, ben etel aviv, a son by his father, tzarich hesibah. Afilu hu rabo mufak, even if his father is his rabbi. Talmid lifnei rabo, a student in front of his rabbi, en tzarich hesibah, he does not need to lean. Afilu eno rabo mufak, even if it's not his main rabbi. Shemora rabo k'mora shamayim, the fear of his rabbi is like the awe of his rabbi is like the awe of heaven. Elim ken yiten lo rabo reshut, unless his rabbi gives him permission, v'az chayav lesev, and then he has to lean. So for example, if our parents invited me to his Pesach Seder, it would be forbidden for me to lean. Now if he told me lean, then I'm obligated to. But I'm not allowed to in his presence to lean. It's disrespectful for a student to do that in front of his rabbi. You could, yeah. Oh, you're talking about that? Here I'm talking about not because of a headache to lean, because of the mitzvah of leaning. Rabbi Yosef, you found it? Leaning. No, not leaving. Not leaving. So, the Talmid Chacham muflag bedoro, and a Talmid Chacham who's famous in his generation. Afal pi shelo lamad mimeno klum. Even if you didn't learn anything from such Talmid Chacham, chashuv kirabo, he's like your rabbi, ve'en tzarich hesibah, and you do not need to lean there at all. So who is a rabbi like that? I don't know. Let's say Chacham Ovadia Yosef, if I was at his home, I would never lean. Even though I didn't study from him and I didn't go to his yeshiva, and it doesn't make a difference. For the world, he is a Talmid Chacham muflag for the whole world. Yes? Rabbi Yosef, you found it?
You said Saif Bet?
Seif Dalet. Taf Ayin Bet, Seif Dalet.
So he says, Isha ina tzricha hasava, im ken hi hashuba.
Okay, so Maran writes the opposite. So women don't need to lean unless they're important. It's the Ramah who says that all of our women are important and therefore they lean. Hava Peretz, for 3 or 4 different reasons altogether, says that women shouldn't lean nowadays. And listen, you can lean if you want. You don't lean if you don't want to. I'm not here to be on you. But when Hava Peretz teaches us these halachot, when Hava Peretz will speak to my wife, he will tell her, don't recline at the Seder Pesach, and not because she's not important. Chas v'shalom. Not because she's not important. So don't walk away like that. To the contrary, and I'd rather not hear now. Okay, we said this. Any person who needs to be reclining at the Seder. If they ate or drank without reclining, they did not fulfill their obligation. They must go back and recline. Meaning drink again. So it could quickly become 5 cups or 6 cups or 8 cups. Or if you're a drunkard, then you might not lean the first 3 times and then do it all over again. That's when does a person need to lean? When you eat that kezait, the olive size of matzah. What is an olive? An olive, like an olive you have in your refrigerator. Yes. You want a big olive, so a big olive that you find in your refrigerator. When you drink the 4 cups of wine, and the rest of your eating or drinking. If you lean, that's recline, that's wonderful. And if you don't, that's also fine. So if you want during hamotzi and during the meal, you want to have your soup reclining, you want to eat your chicken reclining, whatever you want to do reclining, it's okay. You're allowed to, but you don't need to. What else? Hakezaitot, page 96. Sheochlim b'shat birkat hamotzi v'achad matzah. And the 2 kezaits that you eat by hamotzi and achilat matzah, tzachim hesibah. They also need leaning. V'ken kezait shel korech, and also the kezait by korech. What is korech? Right, the sandwich. I'm hoping that I'm able to get myself a little bit of flour for this year Pesach, so that I can actually do. Benjamin Simcha, you're going to send me that. You can tell me where I can actually order from this year. You or Devar and Miriam, I know the 2 of you have been researching this well. I need a place where I can get just a little bit of flour before Pesach for myself, just to be able to do korech properly. I'll make a few matzot, 5 matzot, 6 matzot in my home. Yes.
you're gonna have to let me give me the cutoff date of when for Yashan.
That was my next question, but I didn't want to do it. So we'll figure it out together. B'ezrat Hashem.
Okay, so up to me.
Korech requires rolling of the matzot, which you can do with the crunchy saltine crackers they tell us are matzot. V'chen kezayit shel afikoman. And the kezayit of the afikoman, you need to make sure also that you lean for it. Mi sheshachach lehesev b'shtiyat kosot. Somebody who forgot to recline for one or more than one of the cups. Af shemaran pasak shetzarich lachzor v'lishtot be'eseba. Even though Maran ruled that you must go back and drink it again, reclining, hine adam she'en hashtiya kasha alav yikayem hamitzvah lechatchila ketikuna. So if you're a kind of person who alcohol doesn't influence you so much, and drinking wine, another glass of wine won't do anything to you, there are people like that, then you should go back and do the mitzvah again. Aval misha hashtiya kasha alav, but somebody who drinking wine a second time around is difficult, יכול לסמוך על דעת כמה מהפוסקים שכתבו שאין צריך לחזור ולשתות. You can rely on some of those poskim who say you don't have to go back and drink again. והסכים איתם מרן החידה. And the Chida, he agrees with this. וספקה דרבנן לכולה. And because this whole matter is rabbinic in the first place, and it's a doubt as to a rabbinic law, you're able to be lenient and not drink the cup a second time. By the way, here is a classic case where Sephardim are not ruling in accordance with Maran. And so what does it mean? We accepted the rulings of Maran. So that's why I gave a 3-part class it's on YouTube about this whole conversation surrounding did we or did we not really accept the rulings of Maran. This is one of those fascinating case studies. In Yud Aleph, V'yesh migdolei poskim. There are some of the great poskim. She'hosifu od chumrot b'dinei heseba v'lo etaknu. They added many chumrot by leaning, and we didn't copy them. Ki bizmanenu, that nowadays she'en anu regilim klal beheseba, that we don't even lean at all in our regular lives. V'yesh bnei adam she'alehem letorach rav. There are some people that this whole reclining by the Pesach Seder, it's already difficult, it's annoying, it's bothersome. It not only does not make me feel free, it makes me feel very awkward. ולכן די במה שהתחייבנו לדעת רוב גדולי הפוסקים. So then therefore I'm only leaving it as to what the majority of the great poskim said. The details that other chachamim added is that I feel are not relevant in a generation where we don't probably need to lean in the first place. ויש מי שכתב. And there is a chacham who wrote שבזמננו, that nowadays שאין רגילים לאכול בהסבה כלל, that nobody eats reclining. אין צריך להסב. You don't have to recline. Now, when I say nobody eats reclining, it doesn't mean that there are no people who watch the Super Bowl eating chicken wings and popcorn, with their bellies in the couch. It doesn't mean nobody eats reclining. It means it's not considered anymore a sign of greatness or wealth to be eating while you're leaning back on the couch and eating. I mean, it's now no longer the social norm in the communities, at least, that we frequent. Yeah. אבל כל גדולי הפוסקים חלקו עליו. So who is this posek? Look in 22. I was right. Tur b'shem Avi HaEzri. So this is the Tur. I told you that earlier. The Tur in the name of the Avi HaEzri. He writes this. אבל כל גדולי הפוסקים חלקו עליו. But the majority of the poskim, the great ones, argued with him. וחייבו בהסבה. And they commanded us to lean still nonetheless. ובאמת שהדבר צריך טעם. And especially that this is really, we need an explanation. Why is it that the Chachamim are adamant that we have to lean still? He has an interesting answer here, Rabbi Chaim Halevy. And I'm not sure why he left it as bold, maybe because he took it from a halachic source. ונראה שכיוון שמצווה לעשות שינויים בערב זה כדי שיראו התינוקות וישאלו, because there's so much of an emphasis on doing things differently, so children ask questions on this night, אין לך שינוי טוב מהסבה, שאין לנו רגילים לה. There's no greater different thing to do than leaning at the Pesach Seder. וראיה לזה, and a proof to this is all from the Aruch HaShulchan. Who wrote the Aruch HaShulchan? Who wrote the Aruch HaShulchan? That's the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Chaim Halevy Epstein. Unique Tamicham. So he brings a proof. וראיה לזה שהרי במשנה בשאלות מה נשתנה לא נזכר עניין הסיבה. When the Mishnah asks about the questions the kids will ask of Manishtana, it doesn't mention leaning at all. Why? Shayasam Devar Regil, because in those days everybody leaned. So that wasn't one of the unusual things that happened at the Pesach Seder. And only in the Haggadot that we have in front of us today is it considered an unusual thing for people to lean, and that's why it's one of the questions. And therefore, the final word is like the poskim who say that there is an obligation to lean nowadays. I have 18 minutes left with you, so it's enough time to bake a matzah. But I'm not sure that it's enough time to finish this chapter. What do I do? Let's try this. I'm going to send you right now a PDF. You may have it from last year of Halaperetz and Laws of Pesach. I want to just read with you very quickly the conversation surrounding whether women lean or don't. What do you think? Yeah? We can add that here? Want to call it a night, Chava? Okay. Let's do this, Chava. We're going to pause here for the night. And then we'll do Arba Kosot. We'll do this tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem, and I hope that we'll already continue into the laws of the Seder Pesach. What may happen is that I'll use this Thursday class to finish off the Agadah before Pesach, and then we'll use next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday to finish all the laws of the Seder so that we're not behind in anything that we need for the Seder Pesach. Okay? Chazak v'amad Zev, thank you. Have a good night. All right, Chava, I'm going to wish you a Laila Tov. I'm going to pause the camera right here. If anybody has any questions,